Another year goes by, and with it of course comes a variety of interesting horror games to play, and thankfully, as shown so far with 2024, we got quite a few gems to dig into. We've seen the likes of the Alone in the Dark remake, which I've talked about in my channel before, and the indie darling Crow Country, that while I've heard it's pretty damn good, I still haven't had a chance to play it. But the point I want to make is that in these games, there are rooted a sort of fantasy or surrealism that doesn't convey the horrors of the normal world. Take for instance a horror game set in the middle of a war, which in today's video, fellas, we're going to take a look at Conscript, a World War I survival horror game made entirely by one person, that being of course Jordan Mokai, coming from the land down under of Australia. In Conscript, you play the role of Andre, a French soldier conscripted into the army and unfortunately finds himself in the Battle of Verdun, which was one of the bloodiest battles of the war, in which the Imperial German army took control of the various forts around the city of Verdun in a scheme to bleed France white. Set well into the year-long give-and-take battle for the forts, Andre has one real task in mind, and that is of course to find his brother Pierre and make sure that he is safe so he can bring them back home without losing anyone along the way. Unfortunately for Andre, Pierre is in a detachment of soldiers tasked with holding Fort Vaux, which has been surrounded by the German army and the countless Stahlhelm soldiers who will shoot, beat, and explode you to bits before the French can take it back. So with an entire German army and the endless desolation of what the earliest 20th century can rot between Andre and his brother, it will be up to his ingenuity, skills, and incredible bravery to find Pierre and bring him home. Fellas, it's kind of a very simple premise, but honestly, that's kind of what makes it really work for me, but we'll get onto the narrative a bit later. But for now, let's sit on, grab yourself some brew or any sort of drink that you have in hand. Today I got Tropical Trip, which is from Lemon Soda Energy, because, well, people gave me crap, and so no more Ignus on the channel. By popular demand, I'm drinking something different. So there you go, fellas, let's cheers. And let's talk about some damn gameplay, which is of course styled after the old survival horror greats of yore. You can probably already tell from the get-go that Conscript takes heavy influence from the great survival horror games of yore, such as Silent Hill and Resident Evil, and especially the latter, not just with the aesthetic, but also in a lot of the gameplay. As it is with other classics, in Conscript you'll be going through a loop of going through the map, defeating or otherwise evading enemies, scrounging for items, and using them to solve puzzles or just survive. Like the original Resident Evil or Silent Hill, the camera is pulled back to a fixed angle in all areas of the game, and then you control Andre normally moving around with the keys, and you use the mouse to aim any sort of firearms at your foes to hopefully dispatch them. One quick gripe that I have about the controls is that Andre is always looking wherever the mouse is pointed at, so if you walk up to say an object that you want to pick up or a door that you want to go through, you have to have the mouse in the same direction, or else he just kind of looks away and you have to either press the keys to continuously move in the direction of the door or shift the mouse to move over to the object. It's not the end of the world, but it does get pretty damn annoying at times, especially when you want to escape an area from marauding Germans. He's constantly looking at the wall instead of the door that you're trying to squeeze through. But apart from that, your time in Conscript will be split between two tasks, and that's exploration and puzzle solving, followed by bashing into German's head with your entrenchment tool. Starting with combat, it's relatively simple, and since it follows the same formula as most other survival horror games, which is this dance and risk management of whether or not it might be better to run away and let an enemy be, or if you have to defeat them to continue. Your weapons of choice will all be things that you can find throughout the First World War, such as self-loading ruby pistols, shotguns, bolt-action rifles like the Lebel, and the occasional emplaced machine gun that you can use to mow down Germans as they come across the line. With firearms, you basically ready them with the right mouse or supposedly the triggers on a controller and then fire with the other, and it really does get into the handling of weapons in a very kinetic sense. What I mean by that is that you'll need to manually cycle the bolt or pump the shotgun after every single shot to reload it, and with automatic or self-loading weapons, you don't have to do anything other than replace the magazine when it's empty. But when the fight gets particularly desperate, you'll have to switch over to the good old melee weapons, which could come in the shape of entrenchment tools, knives, axes, and my favorite, the ubiquitous and gnarly as all hell trench club. which does some of the best damage that you can imagine to a 16-year-old forcibly conscripted German boy's forehead. Though there is a sort of stealth system in place that if you're pretty sneaky, you can get the drop on your enemies by bonking them on the back of the damn head, and that typically kills them instantly, which is pretty nice because it won't degrade the quality of your melee weapons or use up any precious ammo. As for the sort of enemies that you'll fight, it's split between the different types of German soldiers, which can consist of normal guys with rifles that have the same issues that you do, so it's this sort of almost turn-based action game when he shoots you and you dodge, followed by you shooting him while he tries to reload and so on. Continuing, you'll find Germans with trench clubs and even bigger, tankier Germans that are carrying some sort of trench armor and axes that typically have me running for my goddamn life since they are such a pain in the ass to deal with. But there is of course one enemy above all else that is such a pain in the ass that it makes me rather deal with a colonoscopy than fight these damn bastards, and those are the friggin' rats. Every time that you dispatch a foe, their poor corpus will be lying there for the mischievous carrion animals to come and munch on. And after leaving the area for a while, they'll grow to a plump size where they can kick your ass and show you kung fu, but sadly these rats will not be giving you a funny, and they'll give you nasty diseases and poison your ass instead. This means the more bodies, the more rats, and the more rats, the more chances that you'll get diseased and need a medic bag, which can be hard to come by, and the alternative to it is to very clumsily pour fuel on the ground and burn the bodies, but that can be a pain in the ass since you have to take up a slot to carry the fuel and a lighter to ignite it with, but I guess that beats dealing with these fiends that are just so cheesed to meet you. Apparently they've nerfed the rats a little bit, which is something you'd probably hear in a Warhammer fantasy game instead of a World War I survival horror game, but well, here we are. Sadly, I didn't think it did jack shit because the rats are still eating my ass alive, quite literally. Though I have to say, fellas, apart from the rats ruining my day, I gotta say the combat for Conscript is nice and responsive, which is exactly what you want for a survival horror game. So, apart from that, I really have nothing bad to say about it. Especially when you're bonking Germans at the back of the head, it's very, very satisfying. Moving on, we should probably talk about the puzzle solving for Conscript because it's nice and plentiful and can be found throughout the entire game, but on the other hand, it's not as esoteric as Silent Hill, which, honestly, is kind of a nice thing right now. Just like those old survival horror games, Conscript takes the idea of scrounging for objects in the environment, saving it for later, and then eventually finding out what you have to do with it, not to necessarily new heights, but it takes a bit of the esoterica that is found in other greats. Don't get me wrong, I love the likes of the piano puzzle in Silent Hill, or scrounging around the police station in Resident Evil 2 to get the statue to open the way for the new area, but there's something that should be said about having puzzles and solutions that amount to, I kinda need to clear this rubble, so, how about I get this part of the trench, and hey, there's a 75mm shell in my inventory, maybe I could use that to blast a damn hole in it. It's a bit hard to describe, but it's nice to think of a solution to a puzzle without having me to really think what the meaning behind the puzzle could be. Like, is there some sort of metaphor that I'm missing? Because we all know the not hidden metaphor of ripping up baseboards to get into a condemned house. That's not to say that there aren't some areas of the game that had me stumped, because apart from the greater goal of contacting this person or saving your brother, Conscript leaves it up to you to fulfill the goal, so there isn't any guidance on what to do next. So there are times where you feel absolutely stumped and have no idea what to do next. In those moments, it is my utmost recommendation that you inquisitively look at your map and see if there was a door or a room that you haven't gone through, because 90% of the damn time, that's where the solution was, so make sure to look at your map if you're stuck. That being said, there is a particular area in the game, which is Chapter 5, where the layers, rooms, and puzzles to get them on the map are so dense and obtuse that I straight up nearly dropped the game at that point. I'm just gonna be real. I want to be clear that I really did enjoy my time with Conscript, but Chapter 5 is such a nasty brick wall of terrible pacing that it sucked a lot of the life of the game at that critical point in its story. And my recommendation for this chapter is to look in every room and check every single item. There will be a spot that you forgot to look at, so please look at the map and take this into account so you can enjoy the game to its fullest and not run around like a chicken with your head cut off for a few damn hours like I did. But overall, fellas, I gotta say, gameplay-wise, Conscript is an incredibly competent and really exquisitely balanced survival horror game that, apart from the damn rats and some bad pacing in Chapter 5, it does an incredible job of juggling exploration and combat, which personally for me, just like it was with Signalis, is an incredibly impressive feat for a one-man band. Honestly, if you just kind of pay attention to the few but minor flaws with the gameplay, you're gonna have a great time, fellas. Now, with the gameplay out of the way, it's time to talk about that wonderful old school charm when it comes to the presentation, because man oh man, this could have been a game that came with a PS1 and you wouldn't have known any better. I gotta say something, fellas, and really get out of my chest, but out of all the damn PS1-like survival horror games, I think this is the one that probably is the closest to getting the aesthetic down pat, to the point that I honestly think if you downscale the resolution, that it would honestly feasibly be working on a PS1, apart from memory size. You got wonderfully crunchy models and textures that have been de-resoluted to the point, like those old games of yore, that they're a bit fuzzy, but you can know that Andre is a French soldier and that stall-helmed guy in a gas mask is a nefarious Fritz that needs a bullet put into him. Of particular that I really enjoyed is a lot of the cutscenes where there would be a character or an action would happen and it feels like an old loading screen, but it's high resolution but crunchy at the same time, and I honestly don't know how he did it. Another good example are the various different posters found throughout the game that could genuinely be found in wartime France that are clear enough to be read, but like those cutscenes are just crunchy enough that it fits perfectly with the game. And these posters are the kind of ones like the famous "They shall not pass" or "Sell your gold for La France" sort of thing. In other regards though, this game can be incredibly dark to the point that if you are in some areas without the trench torch, you'll be left in complete darkness, with only the squeaking of distant rats and the heavy breathing of a gas mask German coming from right behind you. Speaking of Germans breathing down your neck, I think it's high time that we talk about the sound of Conscript, because it does a lot of the heavy lifting for bringing out the spooks. Yeah, I guess it's another one of those horror games that I'm kind of all the way in this section, and I still haven't talked about the horror elements of it, and there's many reasons for that, such as I've been playing these games for a long time, they really don't bug me anymore type of aspects, to just genuinely enjoying the dense atmosphere that it gives you. Conscript does an exquisite job of making just normal sounds that you would think would be fine in any other war game sound dreadful and horrible. Distant artillery strikes hitting the forts, feeling like a coming storm that nobody can escape. The sound of distant screams and pleads for help from soldiers in no man's land, desperate for a Hail Mary or a comrade giving a merciful coup de grace. And of course, the pitter-patter of marching, coughing, and heavy breathing of gas-masked soldiers in the shadows that catches you by surprise. All these horrible sights and sounds combine to give you the feeling that death is never more than a wrong step, a negligent corner turned, or a chlorine-filled breaths away. The only moments of respite being the save rooms where you can gather your wits, save your progress, and maybe even deal with the very "what are you buying, stranger?" type of merchant that is another friend of yours that will say, "Hey, how's it going, Poilu?" I especially love the music that plays here. It's a great mixture of feeling like a place of safety and respite from where you have just been, but also being an omen to the things that will come when you go over the top into whatever new hells that can be produced by the Battle of Verdun. Though apart from that track, there's really not that much going on with the soundtrack that I found memorable. That's not to say that there isn't anything there, it's just that most of it is just really dreary, solemn music that fits right in with the hell of the never-ending war in the trenches. A song dedicated to mud, blood, splintered trees, and long-lost friends. What I do remember from the soundtrack are a couple of standout tracks that really hit it at the right moments that made me reflect on the journey so far. One of these tracks that plays during a section of the game out of the trenches is called Carrying the Flame, that just feels so distantly hopeful for the respite from the carnage, but throughout this section of the game, you'll find the other poor souls trapped in the same mire and the effect the war has had with the land, which is honestly just terrible. Lastly, there's a few sections where you will have the memory of what came before the war of you and your brother Pierre living in your homestead, which usually in these memories are accompanied with Pierre playing something on the piano, various different types of classic piano songs, and so on. But the one song that hits like usual and seems to never be that far away from any horror game, in the same way that Moonlight Sonata is completely tied to horror classics, is the wonderful Debussy piano piece of Clair de Lune, which for me was implanted into my damn brain, no pun intended, with The Evil Within, and how that song was the telltale sign of a safe room nearby. I really do have to hand it to Debussy for creating such a wonderful piece. It never fails to have me feel both safe, like a warm blanket has been wrapped around me, and melancholic for times long gone, which in the case for Conscript and for myself is true for Clair de Lune, whether it be Andre remembering time before the horror and bloodshed, or with myself remembering the times that I first played The Evil Within and this tune got trapped into my mind. So, as per usual, to tie off this section of the game, we're just gonna have another instance of letting the game do the talking. So, well, there we go, fellas. Let's just enjoy it. Well, fellas, we're getting to the end here, but we got one final aspect of Conscript to talk about, and that is, of course, the very wonderful limited narrative that might seem really kind of bare bones at first, but honestly, it really did a lot for me. So, let's get into that. The overarching story of Andre going through the gates of hell in his bid to bring his brother back safe and sound is a relatively basic one, but one where I can really get into by just how often you are reminded along the way who all this horror and bloodshed is for. Whether it be trying to get the keys to a new part of Fort Souvie, or making a mad dash behind your own lines to get a hold of an allied commander so they can go over the top and try to relieve Fort Vaux where his brother is trapped. And in that sense, Andre is always singularly thinking of his brother. Though the destination is only so impactful because the journey through it is the worst hell that you can possibly imagine. And the wildest part of this entire ordeal is that apart from the liberties used to create a game, this is a game concerning real struggles to real people that went through the Battle of Verdun and through extension the entire First World War. The entire journey of Conscript is layered with really human stories of depravity, bloodshed, and horror, but we also get to see the best in humanity, with courage and honor, like with Andre trying to do his best to find his brother, and that makes this ordeal feel all the more real. Whether it be me desperately going back through lines of enemy soldiers that I didn't want to clear to give that medic the tool that he needed to save somebody else's life, were always without fail giving one of the other Frenchmen a cigarette to calm his nerves, never really knowing if I'll ever see those two further along in the game, but doing it regardless because that makes me feel like I have a connection to them. But this is the sort of humanity that is shared not just with your allies, but also with your enemies, because unlike other survival horror titles, these aren't zombies, creatures conjured from your sickened mind, or corruptions of your fellow men trapped in the realm of a dreaming god. These are actually just poor old boys stuck in the same fight as you are, fighting for the same things under the same masters. They will scream in their barbarian tongue about killing you for the Kaiser, screaming at the top of their lungs as they rush towards you with a trench club raised in reckless hate, and you share this bestial hatred with your enemy, trying to outsmart and destroy him, with a nice crunch of the trench club, leaving him on the ground, screaming in pain, asking for help. And at that point, all the zeal is gone from his heart, and when in your bloodlust you still take your entrenchment tool and break his skull open, finally leaving him dead for the rats to feast on. Then you notice, hey, there's a couple of rifle bullets for him to pick up as well, and when you pick up the bullets, it's not just that, but also a picture of this fallen soldier's sweetheart. And at that moment, you develop a pit in your stomach and you realize that even now, the evil seed of what you've done germinates within you. I'm not gonna lie, fellas, because every single time I pick up one of these German photos in the game, it really does hit like a brick wall. Because these aren't just your typical survival horror enemies, for you could be in the same position that this poor soul is in if the roles were reversed. So with that, I really have to give it to Jordan Mokai for creating enemies that are both equally spooky when they get the jump on you, and making you feel like you wrought something that you can't undo when they die. I don't know, man, like the narrative elements to Conscript just really hit me very hard because I have like an understanding of World War I, and it's just honestly like a really just sad and tragic life. There's so much wasted life and opportunity, and it's like that with every single other war. But the First World War is kind of like the last dying grasp of the old world. So, I don't know, it's just it's upsetting, and Jordan Mokai really wrapped it all in a very nice bow that made me think about that and made me kind of like reflective of the whole journey at hand. So, I gotta say, Jordan, cheers, man, because that was an exquisite journey, even if you didn't really intend it, but it really hit me. Though that might be, me going through the Alpine front of World War I in Italy and looking at the Dolomites in the Isonzo Valley, so it might just be that speaking. But you might be wondering to yourself, hey, Dom, do you recommend the game? And it's absolutely. Well, if you're looking for a nice, good old survival horror title that fashions itself from the great old games like Silent Hill, Resident Evil, or hell, even like newer classics like Signalis, then you could do no wrong to pick up Conscript. Conscript does an incredible job of just sticking to the basics and creating a wonderfully horrible game in a good way, with crushing atmosphere that puts into the shoes of all those poor men that had to give their lives in one of the most brutal and tragic wars in human history. And Jordan Mokai has captured that feeling of dread wonderfully. Honestly, every time there's one of those games entirely crafted by one person, I'm just kind of blown away by their ability to create something so genuinely solid in its foundations, wearing its influences on its sleeves proudly, but also spinning it in a new way that we haven't really seen before, setting it in the First World War, though there was Amnesia the Bunker last year, but regardless. If you fellas are looking to pick up Conscript, you can grab it on all major platforms like Xbox, PlayStation, Switch, Steam, and Good Old Games for about €20 or $25 Canadian, which honestly is a pretty fair price for a game that typically takes around 10 hours or so for the first run and warrants another one to find all the different secrets. Well, fellas, we've made it to the end of the video, and if you made it this far, thank you so much. I absolutely do appreciate every single one of your views, and if you're whether a new or an old returning guest and subscriber, I'm so glad that you made it to the end here because I really do appreciate it. And if you really enjoyed this video, hey, maybe give it a like. I really appreciate that, and that actually really does a lot for the algorithm, so whatever, do that sort of stuff. I gotta show that. But if you're a new person, hey, welcome to the channel. I hope you really enjoyed this video, and if you like this video, hey, I'd recommend maybe you go watch my other stuff, and if you like those, then hey, maybe even subscribe. I would really appreciate that. That would be cool. But Like usual, fellas, this is the end of the video, and I gotta say, man, I really did enjoy Conscript. And this year, it's been pretty solid so far for survival horror games, and I haven't even played all of them, because I still gotta go through Crow Country, and then I gotta go through Echostasis, which is another indie survival horror game that I really want to play through. But so far, even with just Alone in the Dark and Conscript, I've been really enjoying it. So hopefully there's some more good survival horror games to come, and you'll be there for us to talk about it. And maybe I'll be making a video of it. And with that, fellas, this is Tom the Chosen One, sharpening his entrenchment tool and smoking his last pack of cigarettes, so a dirty, disgusting, and filthy Austro-Hungarian soldier doesn't take my last pack of cigarettes from my still warm corpse when I eventually die. So with that, I'm gonna head off, go do something else, maybe bash someone's skull in, and I hope you guys have a great day. Hey, take it easy.